Hi, this is Stan. Welcome back to the Crow's Nest Railroad and part 4 of our rebuild series on this 440 American 15-inch gauge locomotive. We're going to be talking about the cab today, so I hope you can join me. Well, we're in my shop here. This is a photograph of this locomotive, and there's its builder, Ben Hammer. He's passed on now, but he built this beautiful locomotive, the number 3, and this was the American style, where you can see the large driving wheels, which usually indicates a passenger locomotive for higher speed. Generally, the freight locomotives had a little smaller driver wheels for more power and less speed. But anyway, if you're new to steam locomotives, they're typically called by the wheel configuration. So this has 4 small wheels up front and 4 in the back, and no tiny trailing wheels. So this would be a 440, and that's how it would be named. And this is in the American style. You can see how fancy it is with the brass and all the different colors. At some point the railroads abandoned that and they just went with black because it was so much easier to maintain. But this locomotive was never finished to the point of getting steamed up, and that's what we're really trying to attempt to do. I have a real tiny part in all this. I've been asked to restore some of the woodwork, and we're going to talk about what needs to be done to the cab today. But you can see how beautiful everything is. But for right now, we've got some issues with the cab that I hope I can address. So the primary thing they've asked me to do here is to reshape the way the cab fits around the boiler. You can see here it's curved and it kind of hugs the boiler. And what they'd like me to do is come straight down from this arc, straight down to the bottom and back. I'm going to go back maybe 10 inches or so. And that way, if need be for maintenance purposes, the cab can be lifted straight up. It doesn't have to be slid back. And sliding it back has a lot more plumbing complications. So that's the primary task that we're going to do. In addition, we have a simple task of replacing the window pane here. On one of the other episodes, you saw me taking the molding, the tiny moldings out of here. We've got to get a new piece of glass cut and put back in here. All right, I got the cab tipped up on its back and clamped into position on the workbench. Well, I noticed this is a crack that probably needs to be fixed before I can proceed. So let's see if we can get some glue, some Titebond 3 on these surfaces and get this clamped back up. We're going to make some cuts in here, and I want to make sure everything is nice and tightly glued before we proceed. I've got this forced open and held with a little matchstick. So I've got a little wet cloth here. So let me see if I can drizzle some glue down in here and see if we can get this to set up. All right, ran some glue in there as best I could. Got everything gently clamped. So let's let it set up and see how it looks tomorrow. All right, well, dried overnight. Let's get these clamps off. Well, at this point, I'm not going to try and refinish this whole cab. I will put some finish where I have to cut the lumber and add some protection there. But for now, I'm going to leave this finish. It's a very nice furniture grade finish on here, so I'm not going to attempt to sand everything down and recoat it at this point. We'll postpone that decision for later. Now for the next step, let me put some tape protection here and here. And now I'm going to trim it away on the edge. Alright, now I can see what I'm doing. Alright, both sides are done. So we're going to make a saw cut starting at the apex of this arc. Come straight down and back at least about 10 inches. So let's mark that. And once again, the reason I'm cutting this is because the cab as it exists right now can't be lifted vertically off because this wraps underneath the curve on the boiler. So we have to get rid of the bottom part of this curve so the cab can simply be lifted off. And now we'll go down in this direction. And the same on this side. Alright, there's our rough cut. I'm going to have to go back with a chisel and a little hand plane and some sandpaper and smooth this out. But let's do the other side first. Alright, everything's shaped and sanded up to about 220 grit. So this is ready now for some varnish. We'll put at least a couple coats on that so that it'll blend in with the rest of the finish on the cab. But before I put any varnish on, let's work on the window. We've got to get the glass put in and all the little pieces of molding tacked in with brads. This is the size of the little pins that I was able to pry out of the molding to hold the window in place. I'm going to be using this size of little nail instead. So I'm going to pre-drill the holes in the molding to make sure that this doesn't split them out. So I clipped the head off one of these brads, mounted it in my drill, and just pre-drilling the holes to make sure they don't split out. This molding is really tiny. So I'll finish up the other three pieces. Okay, I got all the old chunks scraped out of the window frame. And I'm going to put just a couple of dabs of sealer here. really just to keep the glass from rattling and shaking. Kind of roughly tape it in place. And we'll tack it in with these brads. Getting these little brads in place, you have to be able to use the hammer with both hands. Just going to set these with a nail set. Alright, everything is set in. The glass doesn't rattle. We didn't crack any of the molding. Next on the list are these hinges that are broken and need to be replaced on this hatch that goes on top of the cab. That will be tomorrow's project. The last thing I'm going to do today is put a coat of varnish on the parts of the cab that we cut and then sanded. Well, before I can take this cab back out to the museum, I noticed that one of the hinges was really weak and the other hinge was absolutely broken. This is a hatch, an adjustable hatch top that goes on top of the cab. And these are the original hinges, and you can see by looking at them that they were shaped and drilled out sort of in a custom way. They look slightly irregular, and so I had a hard time finding a hinge that I could adapt to use. This is as close as I could get. The key thing is I would like to use the same holes in the top of this hatch and on the cab. So that means I need to match not only where the holes are, but I need to match the distance between these mounting holes in the center of the hinge. So first thing is I label these hinges, 2 of them screwed off with just some wood screws. These 2 are sort of riveted on, so I'm going to get the Dremel and try and remove these. A little warm, but anyway, we got it popped off. I'll drill out these. Well, these hinges here look like they were probably cut down from piano hinge or something else, so I'm going to have to do the same. The hinges that I bought are a little larger than I need, so let's go ahead and get this cut off. Alright, that's not too bad. We got our 2 hinges cut down. Now for the tricky part, I have to match the position of the holes from these old hinges onto the new ones. So let's get busy on that. Alright, we got our hinges modified and mounted to the lid. So I just have to mount it to the cab now. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. Got the hinges cut down and mounted and got all the tiny hardware arranged. So the hatch, as you can see, is adjustable. And this whole top needs to be repainted. I don't have the right color at this time. Plus there is a ridge cap that needs to be fabricated and installed on the top. So we're going to wait on painting. For now, I took some of the red that I did have and I just hit some of the hardware on top so the shiny metal wasn't so distracting. Now you remember we fixed that nasty crack on the front panel. We put the window back in. We reshaped the front of the cab so that it would slip over the boiler, and then we fixed this hatch. Well, this is Stan saying thank you so much for watching. I hope you're enjoying this restoration project. I'm having a lot of fun. Hope you can join me right here next time.